I think before you get into supplements or any of this stuff, spend your money and risk taking potential whatever supplements, you have to limit your pollution and toxin exposure. You have to try to eat as well as you can, and that's limiting artificial fats, artificial preservatives, things like that. And then you have to exercise as hard as you naturally can, and then only then after you do that, and optimize your sleep 8 hours, right? So sleep, food, exercise, limit toxins wherever that may be from. Then start thinking about, okay, how do I further optimize this?
Hey team, what you got?
Hey, what's up? So I have my friend Jason on today. We actually went to school together. We did our PhD a couple years ago, many years ago now, I think. When did we get our PhD? I think it was like
2015.
2015. Yeah, I think for me it's a little later, right? Like you left before me. Anyway, so Jason is a professor of neuroscience. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you are technically a professor of neuroscience.
Yeah, technically, I've never taken a neuroscience course or anything, but yeah, they
But
gave
you
it
do
to me.
study neuroscience.
Yeah.
And we share a lot of common interests, including going to the gym and in general, I guess, making our bodies work better by, trying to optimize it in different ways. So we're going to try to talk about all of these things, but let's see where the conversation takes us. So Jason, do you want to tell us a little bit about your research and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just starting out my own lab and my own research program. And if I could sum it up, I would say I want to, in my new lab here, investigate subcellular organelle quality control.
Okay, I
And
think we need a dumbed down version for
Yeah,
for some
yeah.
non-scientific viewers and
yeah, for sure.
listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So cells are made up of a ton of different pieces, and they have to maintain these pieces, right? Just like a car has to maintain the engine block, the piston rings, things like that. And so I want to study like how the cell does that. And I think it's important because that stuff breaks down with age.
No, but I'm actually I have a couple of questions on this. Maybe
Sure.
that. So think about it I don't this way. I have previous knowledge pretty much zero on my end. I kind of have a initial grasp of what a cell is.
Okay.
That's where I stop. So the first question I would have is there a fundamental difference between a cerebral cell, like a cell in a brain, and cells somewhere else in the body? Like, are they differently made, or you could say they're
Do you
similar?
want to take this, Jason?
Yeah. So, well, oh, actually, no, you should take it, and
All
then
right, all right.
I can kind of
I can
add
try
on
my
to
best.
it.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
correct me because I've been out of the field for a couple of years, but hopefully it's still the same. So I mean, I kind of give this speech to a lot of people that whenever when I still used to date, long time ago, and the girl would ask me what I do, like I give her the spiel about what are proteins, what is DNA, what is a cell, and so on, right? Because I think most people think they know, but they don't really know. So this is a good test because Matteo, you went to school, so you technically know these things, but I think as a lot of people
Right.
that do go to school kind of either forget or like didn't properly learn it. So
I think we studied at the wrong time of our
yeah, also
life.
like I think like when you're a kid,
Yeah.
you don't care about these things, and then
Yeah.
later on, you're like, "Oh, I wish I knew what a carbohydrate was," because I talk about it every day. So anyway, so the body's made of cells, and we all. I mean, let's do like just a tiny bit of developmental biology. So you you get started as one cell, right? When the sperm of your dad and the egg cell of your mom meet, they become one cell and they mix their DNA, and then the set of DNA you have in that cell. So each of your cells has chromosomes. But it has all the chromosomes are basically the same in all the cells of your body, and then they multiply. So you have one cell, then two, then four, then eight, and so on, and then it becomes your body, right? But the DNA or genetic material in all of the cells of your body is identical, basically identical. So there's some caveats to this because there's mutations and so on. But I think like as a first principle, they're copies of each other in genetic terms, right? But they're obviously like they're not the same, right? Because like
Mm.
your eye is very different from your fingers, right? Even though the genetic material is the same. And there's caveats I'm leaving out right now. So what is different is how the DNA is activated or deactivated at different spots on the DNA. So the DNA is like, I wish I had some visuals here because the podcast makes it a little bit difficult. So DNA is kind of like a long string of information. So I always say, like, imagine like a long string, or like maybe like a tape, like in the old days when you had like cassettes or VHS or something. It's similar to that. There's information on a long string, but it's a molecular string, right? It's molecules that make up this piece of information that's on a string, and on the string are letters that are. So we always represent them as letters, but they're really little pieces of the molecule that carry information, and you can think of it as a really long sentence or a long text of in a book or something. And you could say, I think maybe that's the best metaphor. Like you have, I think, 23 books in that library, so it's a lexicon, right? You have 23 books, and each book is a chromosome. It's just like the way it's like segmented. So there's like bunches that are called chromosomes that are not connected, but they're all part of your genome. Okay. And in these books are chapters, and the chapters are your genes. And what makes a gene is just a part of the DNA that codes for a single protein. Correct me if the definition is not correct anymore, Jason. Maybe it's not accurate anymore. But I think this is good. I don't know if it's, I think sometimes there's like things that don't exactly code for proteins, but for other functional units, right? Like RNA, functional RNA molecules or so on. But I think I think usually what we say is a gene is just a piece of the DNA responsible for making one protein. Okay. So then you have some machinery that comes, as the cell develops, there's some genes being activated or deactivated. So that some machinery means actually other proteins, but it's not so important. So little machines come to your DNA and attach to the DNA and start reading this information. And each gene is read and transcoded. So like it's read, and then this machine makes another molecule from it that is called a protein. And the protein is also initially it's kind of like also a string made of other molecules called amino acids. So you might have heard of amino acids from your diet experience. So amino acids are combined to like a string of amino acids. So you can think of it as like a necklace or something, right? With beads. So beads on a string.
To make a protein, you need one bit I know is that to make a full protein, you need X different types of amino acids combined, right?
Exactly. So like you have so the DNA has a vocabulary of 4. So the DNA, we always say, has 4 letters, A, T, C, G. There's technically some other ones, but I think we're going to simplify for now. And they're translated into a 20-letter language, which is the 20 amino acids that are the normal. There's more than 20, but like usually there's 20 in the human body, which are like things you might have heard, like maybe alanine, you might have heard tryptophan, you might have heard tyrosine, you might have heard. The reason you've heard of them is maybe because you're into bodybuilding. So you might know leucine and valine and isoleucine, because those are important amino acids for muscle building purposes. But like tryptophan, which is another amino acid, is also a precursor of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain. But it's a neurotransmitter, but it's also a building block for proteins. Okay. And then so you have the string of these building blocks of proteins, of amino acids, that gets stringed together, and one chapter of the DNA, which we call a gene, does exactly correspond to a protein. So it gets translated to a protein, which is a chain of, imagine like a little chain of balls or pearls of different sizes. And these pearls on the string have different properties, and that makes them either stick to each other or not stick to each other. So like the chain balls up to like this, like a ball. It becomes a ball, but depending on which balls or which pearls are on the string, the ball looks different. And based on the look of the ball, it can do different things. And this is really cool because like I can at a different point in time, I can show you some pictures. There's some really, really cool proteins that do really, really cool things. We have like proteins that are like little motors that actually literally turn like motors and like make things move. We have proteins that walk along walk along other proteins, like on a highway, and transport things. We have proteins that chew up things and can metabolize things. So we call those enzymes. You've probably heard of the term enzyme. And then we have other proteins that are sensitive to light and can convert light to electrical stimuli, and that happens, for example, in the eye, right? So like light gets into your eye, they activate a protein that can react to the light and turns it into an electrical signal for the brain. So that's pretty cool. So basically, all of the stuff that is important in your body is somehow mediated by these little machines called proteins, and the proteins are encoded in the DNA part that is called a gene, and that's why genes are important. So the question you really had, so now it's getting a long story. The question you had was, are all the cells different or not? And they're genetically the same. The difference is which of these proteins is produced, but the dictionary you have is always the same. So what's different is which chapters are being read of your dictionary.
So if I take it from here, right, I can, let's say, and I start to guess the connection, you could say that's why people are different, because the underlying genes are slightly different, or not slightly different. And so they try to do the same things, but they do it with different tools. That's what you say, like they're made of different, like the genes are different, so the starting point is different, but then every human being tries to have the same functions, right? In a way, like we all have a brain. The brain tries to, like, we try to have eyes, and eyes try to look for things, right? Is that what you're saying? No, but I mean, does it make sense as
I'm not sure.
explains the differences?
So the difference. So first of all, I think it's important to clarify that humans, on a genetic level, like if you just look at the genes between different humans, are extremely similar to each other, right? So I think just to compare,
and actually, like humans are one of the most inbred species on the planet.
Yeah, I think like
we're very, very similar.
There was a study recently saying, based on like a study of the genomes of mitochondria, which, it's maybe a little bit too complicated to explain, but mitochondria are little organelles, and I think Jason will talk about mitochondria later, probably because he studied them.
Sure.
But they have their own set of genes in the mitochondria, so it's a little piece of it's a little body inside of each of your cells that has a separate set of genes, and that set of genes comes only from your mom, as opposed to your main set of genes that is on your main DNA in the cell that comes from your mom and your dad. But the mitochondrial DNA only comes from your mom. And there was a study, and maybe I misremember, Jason, you might read more on this recently than I do. Okay. But I think they showed that all humans come from one single lady in Africa from a couple I guess 100,000 years ago. So there was there was one basically grandmother of all of us, which I guess all current humans come from, based on the genetic study of the mitochondrial DNA. I think I don't misremember this, but maybe Jason,
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it's funny because species throughout evolution can go through these things that scientists term bottlenecks, where there's famine, or the weather changes, or there's some disease that comes through and wipes out 99% of the population. And so like cheetahs, for example, are another really inbred species that are almost all cheetahs are almost exactly genetically identical. And they had like a bottleneck event, probably a disease or something like that, that came through, and they're all basically descended from one or two founders. And so you can do that to, you can trace back the genetic lineage of humans, which is what Tim's referring to, right? And you can see like, okay, there must have been a really severe bottleneck event for all of us that happened X number of years ago in this location.
So you're saying that at some point in time in the history of humans, we were down to like one single couple?
No, it's just that only that one woman had any descendants that survived until now. All the other women at that time died out, or their children died out at some point.
Which still implies that there were very few, because what are the chances that the others it could be that they didn't survive because we
really can't say, different, right? But like probably statistically probably yes. That's what I would say.
That's very cool. And do we know like
what her name was?
No, but roughly like how much time ago was it?
We
That
probably
was?
do approximately, but I don't know. But we could look at. Do you know, Jason?
I don't know. No.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, it must be 100, like 10, at least tens of thousands of years, right? But I don't know if it's way. How old is humanity?
Oh man.
200? Is it 200,000?
Oh, I just checked it out. So it says, if it's true, 140,000 to 290,000 years ago.
Yeah,
That
so
sounds
probably,
right.
Rough
yeah,
estimate.
probably
Like,
that,
double the
probably
time.
that
Yeah.
lady was then, I don't know, maybe 20, 30, whatever thousand years ago. But I don't know. Like I could say something completely wrong. Anyway, so let's get back to the cell. So what I wanted to say is that genetically we're all extremely similar, and I think, I don't know the number, but I would say over 99% genetic match between one person and the next, right?
Yeah,
90,
and if I can jump in, like I like to think of this as, there's not a group of people who have a brand new protein or a brand new gene,
if
right?
they do, they would probably die, right? I mean,
Right.
that would be genetic
I'm
disease, right?
exactly
Yeah,
right. Like if even if they have more copies of a certain gene, right? So like Down
yeah,
syndrome is a copy of a whole chromosome. That these things cause cancers and other uh, developmental issues. But most everybody has small, they call them small nucleotide polymorphisms. And so these just cause different, I like to think of it as like different flavors of genes. They act or behave slightly differently, or their stability in the cell is slightly different. And that's what gives rise to all the diversity.
yeah.
But that drives the question then from my end again. So you basically, this implies that there's one right way of doing things, and like there cannot be other ways. Like if it's fundamentally different, it wouldn't work.
Let me get this one real quick. So there's also, we still didn't really answer the question about the cell. I'll finish that in a second. So there's uh, there's mutations happening all the time to your DNA. So both in your germline, which is kind of your sperm or eggs for the females, I guess, but also in your somatic cells, right? That's what they're called. It's the cells that are not your germline. So the cells in your finger, your eye, or your brain, whatever. They mutate all the time based on random chance, but also external stimuli like light will mutate, like sunlight will mutate the cells on your skin, which can cause cancer, but doesn't have to cause cancer. So if the light breaks your DNA a little bit, it can get repaired into the proper DNA that it used to be before. So like it's like a proofreading mechanism of the book. So there's like suddenly there's like stains on your book, and you have to guess what the word was, basically, right? I don't know how well the word metaphor works, but I'm trying to go with this one. And Jason, please interrupt me if I'm saying something
Yeah.
wrong, because for me biology has been a little bit longer ago than for Jason. But anyway, so like there's like proofreaders in your cell that like try to fix the mistakes all the time, and if it goes well, either if it goes well, like the cell just lives on and works as usual. But there's stuff accumulating all the time. If something goes wrong, the cell can die, and then, for example, that would be like sunburn, and then you shed some skin, right? Otherwise,
Yeah, right. So basically, right, like if the cell doesn't repair the damage, if there's a DNA break, the cell cannot survive. So the cell is going to try to repair that no matter what. Hopefully, it repairs it without introducing errors, and then everything goes on like normal. But if it repairs it and it introduces errors, that's kind of okay with the cell because it survives near term.
However, some errors are really problematic, and if they accumulate, they can cause something called cancer, right? What happens in those cells, and there's many types of mutations that don't cause cancer, and there's also types of tumors that are not cancer. And I don't know the technical definition of cancer, but I think cancer just means that it's affecting a certain set of genes that make it grow uncontrollably and don't get recognized by your immune system to be wrong, right? Is that correct, Jason?
Yeah, so I've actually struggled with this definition for a long time, right? Because you can have a benign tumor,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the definition of a benign tumor is uncontrolled cell growth, but it
Doesn't infect other tissue types. Maybe that's what
it
it is.
doesn't
It
metastasize. I
doesn't
mean,
metastasize. Yeah.
like that's kind of what it is, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't agree with kind of the wording and the definition, because you can
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to have a benign tumor. It's uncontrolled cell growth.
Yeah, you can still die from a benign tumor,
Yeah.
technically. I think like
Oh,
so like
absolutely.
for example, like without getting too detailed or too personal here, like but I know some people that have benign brain tumors, and it's actually not that uncommon to have a benign tumor. I think like most of you will have, most of the people listening plus us have some benign tumors somewhere, right? Do you disagree, Jason?
I think if you live long enough, you're going
Yeah.
to have it, right?
I mean, there's some benign growth somewhere, and I think like
Yeah.
a wart is a benign growth. In most cases, can be non-benign, right? Like
Sure.
genital warts are tumors in a way, and genital warts are also caused by viruses that cause mutations in your genes that cause this growth. And if this growth goes wrong over time, it can also cause cancer, like cervical cancer is caused by
Yeah.
a virus that causes mutations in the cervix of the women.
Mm.
And moles are gross. Like I have tons of moles, and there's like most people have weird bumps somewhere, right? Either you see them because they're on your skin or they're in your body or whatever. And most of them don't do anything because they're kind of controlled. They don't grow too much. They don't infect other tissues. They don't go to some organs. But in some rare cases, there's a set of genes affected that will make it multiply like crazy and also go to other tissues and other organs and really fuck your body up. And that's what we call cancer.
Right. But the reason why the benign ones like could cause problems is because they would basically affect other like close enough organs, right? The problem is that if they grow too much, they tend to grow slower, and if they grow too much, they can affect other, just because they pressurize the other
I think
organs.
They're like out
this.
competing.
Yeah, I think that so there's the benign case, which is just like space, or what do you call it, like space taking growth or something.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sure.
I don't know. There's like a medical term. So, for example, if you have a brain tumor, and it just grows, but it doesn't metastasize, it can like squeeze your brain, right? So it'll
Right.
squeeze your brain, and then there's some pressure in your brain, and that's still called a benign tumor and not cancer. But it's taking away space of the healthy tissue,
Right.
and then it will give you some neurological problems. But what cancer does is it's way worse, because cancer, like some of the cells could go to your bloodstream or to your to your lymphatic system or something, and they can go to other organs and grow there too. So this is what makes, for example, melanoma really dangerous compared to other skin cancer types. So there's different types of skin cancer, and one of them is called melanoma. And melanoma is much worse than the other ones because it can go to your blood and then infect other organs, like your lung, I think. I might be mistaken about this, but I think your lung and your bones or something.
Yeah.
And then this really fucks you up, because the other types of skin cancer, like usually you can just cut them out. But with melanoma, if you're too late, it'll infect the rest of your body, and like you can't be saved from that.
But so I have a question, like going back to the point of we were saying big differences from the proper pathway, let's say, that we're saying human beings kind of have a very similarity in terms of genes, because of what happened in like 100,000 years ago, of these bottlenecks you mentioned. And then probably that's the reason, right? And then the main point there is, if we go like, if a new human being like is born and grows and has a very different set, like some real differences compared to the average, these will tend to not survive. But it's not necessary because of, I'm trying to summarize, right? But it's not necessary because of the uncontrolled growth of the cells, right? It could be for other reasons, like, or that's the reason, like if it's different, it tends to, like, cells will tend to grow uncontrollably, or is just one of the outcomes possible of these mutations?
So I mean, there's a couple of things packed into this one. So mutations happen all the time, and most of them are non-viable, I would say. So again, Jason, please correct me if I make mistakes. But because you have thousands and thousands of genes, how many genes do we have, Jason? Like 300? 30,000. 30,000, yeah. 30,000 genes, and most of the mutations that can happen will kill the cell, I think. Right? Yeah. Because just because, like, if you mess up the protein, it will stop working, and then the cell just dies. Okay, so then
is it to draw a comparison? Is it like the same as like on Earth, given the circumstances, given the ecosystem of Earth, like you need to have specific traits to be able to survive in the atmosphere and everything. It would be like a good comparison to make.
I don't
Like,
understand.
so yeah,
Kind of. I think it's more like this is a really complex, the body is a complex system, complex machine. And if one part or, stops working, even if it's a tiny part, it can kind of have like a cascading effect.
Yeah, so
okay.
most mutations will, I think, be very fatal. I think maybe I'm wrong about the statistics on this, but I think most mutations, if you just randomly mutate something, most mutations will make the protein stop work, right?
Yeah,
Stop functioning, and then I think the cell will die. And if your germline has mutations that are fatal, then I think like your child wouldn't develop properly or would never be born, maybe.
exactly.
Um,
And so I think a statistic that maybe not a lot of people know about is that a third of all pregnancies are actually naturally terminated in the first trimester.
yeah, and many women don't know about this.
A third, the chances are 33 to 40%. If you get pregnant and you're testing every day and you realize, oh, shoot, I'm pregnant, 3, 4 times out of 10, it's not going to go to term.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why people wait to say it until it's past the third month,
That
I
is
guess,
Yeah,
right?
exactly
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
people wait. Yep.
yeah. And and then I think like the point of this is that mutations need to have a small effect to be viable, right? So like the changes to your genes that survive have to be small to be viable. That doesn't mean that your genome can't change a lot over time, but each incremental change needs to be small, because like if suddenly let's say you have a child and the child looks like a dog and not a human being, like there's like some really crazy mutations happening and your child is like a dog, like I mean, I mean, I'm just saying some random stuff, but like, or it's like you give birth to a jellyfish or something, which this doesn't happen because it's statistically extremely unlikely, but if it did happen, it wouldn't survive in a human society, right? A jellyfish wouldn't survive in a human society, so the likelihood is that it will just die. That doesn't mean we cannot turn into jellyfish, right? Because I mean, or actually the other way around.
So that would say that that's the reason why crossbreeding probably most of the times doesn't, like, it's very delicate because you're messing with completely different approaches to life. Is that
I,
Yeah,
I, yeah,
crossbreeding doesn't work for a number of reasons, right? But most of it has to do with you would have like a sperm or an egg from two different species with different chromosomes, and if the chromosomes aren't similar, that new cell can't divide.
yeah, it doesn't match. Like it's almost like they're speaking a different language. Like it won't
Yeah,
work.
okay? It wouldn't even
Yeah,
work in the first
it,
place.
it
That's what
works.
you're
It
saying.
works with some species that are very very similar to each other, and usually it works for one generation only. Like like you can have a lion and a tiger mate, and then I think the offspring will be infertile, and same for like I guess what is a mule? No, what is it? Like
it's
a
donkeys
donkey
and
and a
mules,
horse is a mule, right? Like a donkey and a horse is a mule,
Mm.
something.
and
Yeah,
yeah, but mules are infertile, I think, right?
I think so.
I think yeah, it's usually like that, and actually that proves that that all humans are the same species, because no matter where you're from, like you can have children, right, with each other,
Right.
which is not the case for, actually it used to be the case for like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, right? They could have children,
Yeah.
so they're close enough, but I don't know what the children looked like. But from what I know, that we all have some Neanderthal genes, so
Well,
So the classic example, humans and monkeys, like that wouldn't
no, that
work
would not
at
work.
all.
No.
Yeah.
Humans and monkeys would not work. There might be some types of monkeys that, or well, it must be apes, right? Because we're apes and not monkeys. But I think like maybe some types of apes can intermate, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I wouldn't know. Maybe like gorillas and chimps or something. Who knows?
I haven't researched this
Yeah.
extensively.
Anyway, like let me really like wrap up the question from earlier, which is, so the cells are genetically identical, but they're, what is the other term? They're like morphologically different, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is just which genes are active at that moment. And the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is, we can turn each cell of the body into another type of cell of the body by manipulating them somehow. And what we call a stem cell is a cell that didn't differentiate yet. So it's a stem cell. You probably heard the term stem cell. It's a cell that didn't decide yet what type of cell it is. That's a stem cell.
Right, it's like the passepartout
Yeah.
cell. So those and I have a question about that. So I read about stem cells, right? And there are certain, but also among stem cells, they can be quite different from each other, right? Like I give you the or maybe it's the obsolescence of the cell. Like one example is they say there's a procedure, there's a way to get your stem cells from your wisdom tooth, right?
I don't know. Never heard of that.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah. So you take dental pulp.
Sounds
and
gross.
that's pretty interesting because you like it's a place where you can get stem cells even later on in life, right? Compared to when you're I don't know the exact term, but like when you're born, the how do you call it?
The umbilical cord? You mean the cord? Yeah.
Right, the umbilical cord. That's like a classic place where you would take stem cells. Nowadays, people do, right? People do it, and like preserve them for the future for their children. But because you can use it potentially multiple different ways. But what I read, and I of course I don't know much about it, but is that there's a difference between the two because the stem cells in your teeth, like they age, and by aging they're not as functional as the stem cells from your umbilical cord. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, that's completely accurate. So the cells accumulate damage, and this kind of goes back to like what I study. So cells accumulate this damage over time, and it's insults from the environment, physical or chemical insults, and these like hurt the parts of the cell, and the cell can't always repair this as it would want to. I can't really repair it to new. Like if you get in a car accident, a lot of times, the mechanic can do the best that he can, but he can't rebuild the entire car. And so he fixes it. It works really well, but it's never going to be quite the same. And so this is the type of damage that like stem cells or postmitotic cells will accumulate over the lifespan of an organism.
Well, first of all, can you clarify what postmitotic means and why not every cell is postmitotic? Because you would think so.
Oh, yeah. So postmitotic cells are just cells that don't divide. And so these are cells that, like your neuronal cells, muscle cells, cardiac cells, and they can't. They're interesting. One, because they don't divide. They're there when you're born and they're there when you die. And so the mechanisms that they use to repair themselves, I think, are really interesting. And that's the focus of my research. It's trying to figure out how these really special cells that stay with you your entire life maintain themselves. Because when they don't, when they're not able to maintain themselves, when they're not able to repair the little bits and pieces inside of them, tissue dysfunction arises. And these lead to diseases like heart failure, neurodegenerative diseases, things like this. All the diseases that you think of that are age associated.
Very interesting. But so like by connecting this to the thing you guys said before, which was you could technically reprogram any cell to do something different. Would there be a way to like take these special cells and like reprogram them to be used in other scenarios?
Yeah, and this is kind of a really interesting and fascinating area of research because there's kind of two big problems with the aging process, right? Well, three, actually, the way that I see it. So there's accumulation of damage and accumulation of dysfunctional cells that cause problems just by being there. They're not functional, they're taking up space, or they're releasing inflammatory factors. There's the problem of rejuvenation. So new cells aren't being made the way that they used to be made. And then there's probably the problem that Tim was touching on, and that's cancer, that's uncontrolled cell growth or infectious disease, things like that. Those are kind of the three pillars I see as like issues of living, forever, right?
What's the guy that had this like super famous TED talk on I want to say 6 or 7 reasons for aging, like Aubrey
Aubrey de Grey.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Like is this still like the view of things? Maybe it's like
I'm
actually
not
not.
sure. I'm not
Okay.
so Aubrey de Grey. I read one or two of his books a while ago. He's not really a researcher. He's more of a
A journalist.
research communicator. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
or an advocate.
Is his background
So
science or no?
a little bit of science. Like
Mhm.
he did a bachelor's and maybe he did a master's.
Mm.
But he's never run his own lab, as far as I
Got
can
it.
tell.
Well, neither have I.
Um, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, uh,
So, Tim, you're not a scientist.
Yeah. According to Jason, I'm not.
sorry, I didn't mean it like that. But I mean, he advocated, or at least a while ago. It's cool because he does put some frameworks down for, and I think this might be what you're talking about, the things that we need to solve to live forever. Um, and some of them everybody kind of agrees with, but one of them that really stuck with me, and this is just from memory, is he advocated for eradicating your hematopoietic stem cell niche, because a lot of diseases of cancer arise from that. So a lot of different leukemias and things like that
I
arise
think
from that
again
niche.
we need a dumbed down expression.
Oh yeah, so
We should have a jingle for that.
it just
Like a
just
little-
beeps.
Countdown time.
$1 into the jar for jargon.
Oh my gosh! So your hematopoietic niche is just your anything that's in your blood. So there's a lot of different cells in your blood. There are red blood cells, platelets, and things called white blood cells that fight infection. A lot of times, these white blood cells, their job basically when it comes to finding an invading infection is to rapidly expand, right, and fight this infection. And so they're primed to rapidly expand, like that's their job. And this is a hallmark of cancers, of tumors, right? And so they're kind of already on the cusp of being a cancerous cell type. And so if they take one or two insults, normally that might not turn a normal skin cell into a tumor or cancer, but it's going to turn these blood cells into a leukemia or lymphoma,
Yeah,
something like
maybe
that.
let me like try to rephrase this a little bit, and maybe I misunderstood it, but basically there's like a number of steps that take a normal cell to a cancer cell, and I think Jason is saying that these types of cells are already a few steps along the way, and just like one or two further steps will turn them into cancer. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so he advocated for engineering white blood cells to kind of lack telomerase so that they had a limited replication potential, enough so that they could expand and fight an infection, but not so much so in that they could expand forever. So telomerase is an important enzyme. It goes around and repairs the ends of your chromosomes. And this is absolutely essential if you want to replicate your cells in perpetuity.
Mm.
And so this is something special that immune cells do, and they upregulate this certain enzyme. And so he said, take that away. And
So he basically wants to make them age faster, which is ironic,
yes,
right? Yeah.
yes. But by doing that, you take away their ability to cause leukemias, and leukemias affect. They're a huge cancer burden on the human population.
Yeah.
And so he thought, we'll just have these engineered stems, blood cells. We'll give you a bunch every 5 or 10 years. At the end of 10 years, they will have naturally aged out, and you won't be able to fight infection very well. So you'll need like a booster, like a booster transfusion.
And those are engineered from your own cells, probably, right?
Supposedly, yeah. I mean, this is all just like theoretical. This is
Yeah.
just him, like theorizing.
Yeah.
But I mean, that idea is probably pretty out there. I don't know if I really agree with that type of intervention.
But I think it touches on an interesting thing, which is that aging is things not being repaired, but cancer is things being basically on the other end of the spectrum, like being infinitely good at repairing themselves, right?
Exactly, exactly.
And
It's
that's really
two.
the problem. It's like this. It's very delicate fight between these two.
Right. I was thinking about the same thing, but like the problem there is that it's not really repairing; it's replicate. Like how? What's the difference? So basically, you're saying two things, right? As far as I understood. On one end, you're saying cells with age they age because they repair themselves not well enough many
Right.
times, and so they try to repair themselves, but they don't, and so they function less. It's like when you break your bone, let's say your foot, it fixes itself, but it depends how you actually go through the process of fixing it. It could fix better or worse, and then you end up like walking a different way because you broke it on the first place. So so they function a little bit different after they repair, and so this like makes them, pass me the non-scientific term, cranky in a way, right? Like you live, you still function but less good, basically.
Yeah.
On the other end, replication of cells is like, okay, this cell dies out, but I need another one, and so I replicate the cell. And the uncontrolled replication of cells is the problem that causes cancer, right? If it happens. So those two are elements, but replication is not really repairing, right? It's like when you substitute a cell with another one. Is that fair? As
Yeah.
I mean, replication is growth and like replacement, right? I mean, so that's actually something I'm not super strong on. So because like cells divide all the time, even in an adult, right? Maybe Jason, you can talk a little bit about this because I actually don't remember, like what cells still divide and what cells don't, and why some cells do and some cells don't.
Yeah. So tons of cells still divide. So all of your GI tract has cells that are constantly replenished. So you have little intestinal stem cells that constantly give out new cells that are then pushed to the surface of the intestine and then are eventually quickly really sloughed off.
And I guess
So there's
the reason is because the intestine gets so much, I guess, wear from digestion, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's usually
Um,
like, I guess it's the tissues that get a lot of wear. Is that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's all kind of evolution isn't pre like it's not like intelligently designed, right? Like it's just kind of happy accidents, and
So
so
you claim.
right, and, and so like some tissues are really good at self repair, and some tissues are not, and why is that?
But
We
also,
don't,
I think the tissues that are good at it are more likely to turn into tumorous growths, right? Is that correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
because they replicate a lot, and that there are more chances that they replicate like the replication control like
Yeah,
fails. Is that the reason?
yeah, yeah. So like for example, like a brain tumor, like Tim was saying, I think it's pretty rare to get a neuroblastoma, like a neuron turning into a tumor. What's more common is when the support cells, like the glial cells, turn into tumors because those cells are the cells that are dividing in the brain. I think.
Yeah, I don't know anything about neuroscience, but generally, definitely, like each cell division is a chance for something going wrong, right? So, and some tissues divide, some tissues replicate, and some tissues don't.
Jason, you mentioned a third way of aging, if I heard correctly, right? You were saying replication, uh, uh, which basically makes it so you the can you repeat
Yeah,
them
yeah,
once again?
yeah.
Because I
So think of the analogy of all the parts of a machine, like of a car, and the human body is a car, and we have parts to ourselves. So we have organs, and these organs need to be kind of self-sufficient. And so the things that can go wrong with these organs, say like the heart, for example, let's just use the heart, are things like bad cells can accumulate, bad dysfunctional old cells accumulate, and just by being there, they get in the way of proper functioning of the heart. One, just physically, they're not functional, and so the heart has to kind of grow around them and enlarge. But two, they can release inflammatory factors that can cause just a constant state of immune infiltration. So immune cells go in there and try to eat healthy cells, try to eat old cells, and your organs don't like to be in that state. They don't function well in an inflamed state. So
I
those
have to
are
say, I never understood the point of inflammation. It seems like the body damaging itself for no reason. There's probably a reason, but I just don't get it.
so I mean, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense, right? But it's to kind of
Call
call
upon the
all this,
police.
yeah, basically like it's big floodlights saying there's a problem here, come fix it. And usually the problem is infection.
Yeah.
And so usually you want to gobble up everything in the area. Like we're not, we haven't evolved to age into the year hundreds, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We're evolved to replicate. And that can happen in the first 20 years of our life. And then the body, there's no evolutionary pressure really to go past that. So what you're worried about in the first 20 years of life isn't dying of an infection. And so that's what our bodies are primed to do.
Yeah,
And that's how I think about it.
yeah, that's not.
Then,
I never thought about it that way. I wonder how the body gets it wrong with, like, inflamed tendons and all this stuff. Because as you get older, and I definitely know this. I get tendonitis all the time, and I'm like, what's the point? Like, just either repair it or leave me alone.
right? Yeah, I mean,
But in a way, so isn't this connected to the concept of like muscle growth? Like to get muscle growth, you actually have to like produce, like, but by using your muscle, you create inflammation, and that actually promotes muscle growth.
That is a great
like,
question, and I would like Jason to take this one because I don't.
yeah. So I think it's not inflation like from an immune perspective. It's inflation maybe from like a damage perspective, and there are cell intrinsic mechanisms in the muscle that repair that. Like they don't need immune infiltration for that specific cause of damage, I guess.
So are you saying
it is a good question? It is a
is
good
it a
question.
side
I
effect?
don't think I have an answer.
Because like there's this, I mean, so this is maybe it's tangential, but we also all care about this. So I watch a lot of exercise scientist YouTubers, and there's like Mike Israetel, for example. He talks about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Mike Israetel?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so he says that even though I think it's basically proven that soreness doesn't cause muscle growth, it's highly correlated, right? Because all the things that cause soreness are also the same stimulants, or are basically stimulants of muscle growth as well, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what is soreness? Do we even know exactly what soreness is? Is it just a buildup of lactic acid?
No, I think that's that's the burn. No, I think that's the burn. I thought soreness is actual tissue damage.
Okay.
And I mean, it's maybe we're getting sidetracked here, but I think so. And I would say like what I read in the research, I didn't like. I saw YouTubers talk about it, but they claim it's in the literature, which is that there's 3 mechanisms for muscle growth, and one of them is metabolic, which is like lactate buildup and so on, which is the burn you feel when you like work out a muscle hard.
Yeah.
Then there's time under tension, I think, or like I think it's actually tension in the elongated state. There's like a researcher that works on this, which is if you load the muscle in the lengthened position, so like very heavy eccentrics, for example. And this is also very highly correlated to soreness. That's why actually like now when I go to the gym, I actually try to target soreness because I try to overload my eccentrics a lot. And I tend to get super sore from that. And I'm, at least in my brain, that means I'm growing. I don't know. But this also causes more inflammation, which means you're going to wait longer to be able to go to the gym again, unless you want a chronic inflammation in these muscles and tendons, which sucks. But from what I understand, the soreness will also cause, through the inflammation, more blood flowing to those tissues, which means more nutrients, and also more amino acids and more whatever else factors you need to grow muscle, maybe even more growth hormone or whatever. So because
I have a question. I need a jingle for that as well, because you touched on a subject, and I always had this curiosity. So, sorry to interrupt, but like I needed to ask this. So the problem, like, there's this like debate, or at least in my head, with aging related to the growth hormone, right? IGF-1, like the fact that apparently that could be a precursor, like if it's very high, or at least help in the process of like uncontrolled proliferation of cells,
Yeah.
right? So cancer and everything. And but so it's needed on one end, right? Like if you want to grow as a human, like with age you want to grow, like become an adult, you need IGF-1. If you have too little, like it doesn't really happen. And on the other hand, fitness, right, bodybuilding, like tries to stimulate growth hormone, right? On the other hand, it's not healthy for you to have it too high, or at least is that a risk? Like what's the what role does IGF-1 play on that front? Like should we be concerned of like keeping it low or not too low, because otherwise that impairs other functions of the body?
Yeah, no,
Or
so you've just touched on I mean, you're clearly very intelligent. You've just touched on a whole field of research, and it's one of the oldest fields of aging research. One of the first mutations in a model organism that was identified to significantly extend lifespan, and this was in a model organism, a worm. It significantly extended lifespan. That it shut down the IGF pathway. This worm couldn't do it, and the worm ended up living like 30 or 50% longer than the control cohort. And
That is
so,
an adult worm, right? I'm guessing, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to become an adult. Is that correct?
no, it was a germline mutant. So
But
what
what does IGF-1 do then? Like it has a function, right? It makes
stimulates growth? So these worms were smaller.
okay, but like
Um,
so you don't actually need IGF-1? Like you can survive without it? I thought
I mean, that's a good question for humans. In
okay.
simple model organisms, I know you can disrupt the pathway, and they're all smaller.
Okay.
They're much smaller. They don't have they don't build up age related damage as fast, and they live longer. So, to your point in bodybuilding or muscle building, absolutely, stimulating this pathway will age you faster. Getting bigger is the opposite of longevity.
And is that related to this whole field of caloric restriction?
Yeah. So it shuts down CR, caloric restriction, shuts down this whole pathway along with other pathways,
Which is
growth
kind of
related
like what
pathways.
all these like intermittent fasters are targeting. Is that what they're targeting?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Yeah.
I mean, I honestly don't know
so
what I think. There's like a lot of claimed benefits to fasting, right? But I guess that's one of them. Like reducing insulin levels will reduce IGF-1 probably, and then I mean, I'm just like saying stuff without knowing, but that's my guess. And then um,
so one would argue the less you use your body, the more you would live, but it's not the case, right? Like because if we take this to an extreme, right, and you say, okay, the more you eat, the more it impacts your health, because you're basically logerating like your organism, like all the, I don't have the terms today, but like basically your functions, like you basically bring them to an extreme. It's like if you have too much exercise, you eat too much, you're basically getting a lot of pressure on your body, right? And that like promotes aging in a way, we could say. But on the other hand, if you do too little, also there's a problem, because if you don't exercise at all, if you don't eat at all, right, there's a kind of a balance. Is that the main issue?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go to an extreme.
Yeah, and that's my big problem with all these people who really buy into the caloric restriction argument, is that yeah, they're calorically restricted and they've shut down all these pathways, but if you look at them, look at these people, they look sick, right? They're gaunted. They don't have the bone density, the bone mass. They don't have muscle mass. They're going to be prone to falls, fractures, and I would estimate, I don't have data on this, but I would estimate infectious disease too. So they're not exercising, they're not getting the nutrients that they need. If they were in a bubble and they were calorically restricted and they didn't move, they were suspended in a water bubble, right? So, no chance of falling, no chance of infection. Yeah, they might live longer. They would probably live significantly longer, but they're
there's a
not.
There's a statistics. There's a statistic, and I don't know the exact statistic, but it's from a theoretical biology model that I heard in university, which is even if we didn't die of biological factors, we would statistically only live to 1,000 years, just because other circumstances would kill us.
Yeah, some mechanical accident. Yeah.
And I think another thing, and again, this is something I'm not in this research. I'm not in this field of research, but what I've heard is that stress can turn on certain rejuvenating cascades
Yes.
in your cells, and
Yeah.
so like stress to an extent is good, right? Like we because like as Matteo said, working out makes us live longer also, even though it is causing stress on the body. So what the question is, how much working out is good for you? Because like clearly not working out is not healthy. Like I think there's almost
Yes.
no one that would debate that. And I think, and this is kind of like my canon on this. So my interpretation of the research from the limited exposure I've had is that if you get like little stints, little like bursts of inflammation and stress, recovering from it is super beneficial for your body. But like if you chronically are under stress levels, then it's really bad for you. So that's the way I think about it. So if you have a strong burst of stress like from the gym, and then you take the time to recover, then your body will heal stronger than it was before. But if you're chronically, like if you go to the gym every day 8 hours a day, like you will probably die from inflammation or something. And I think like the best example, or like the one of the one of the examples that I've thought about was because I went to the doctor and I got this injection of cholesterol. I was gonna say no of cortisol. Cortisol, yeah, cholesterol of cortisol for my tendonitis, and I'm like, why would you inject a stress hormone into me to heal my tendon, right? Like it doesn't make any sense.
Wait, was it cortisone or cortisol?
Wait, is that different?
Cortisone is a steroid.
Okay, what is really?
Cortisol is a stress hormone.
Oh, so maybe I've been mixing them up this entire time.
I'm sure it was cortisone.
Oh, we gotta cut this one out.
Yeah, so
you're editing it.
So cortisone is a steroid, a cortical steroid, right, which will decrease inflammation.
Oh, now I'm actually very confused. Maybe I mixed them up all this time. Cortisol is a steroid hormone, and cortisol is the stress hormone, right?
Yes.
But it is okay. But cortisol is the same as hydrocortisone.
Cortisol.
No, cortisol is hydrocortisone.
I mean, there are. I don't know if it's exactly this. Is it exactly the same?
Okay.
I mean, it's a similar base structure, I'm sure.
Okay. I mean,
maybe I'm messed up. Maybe cortisone and cortisol are the same thing. I don't know. Let's Google this real quick.
Hydrocortisone is the name for the hormone cortisol when supplied as a medication.
But I mean, it's the same concept as why cold exposure, heat exposure, like
exactly. This is the whole like Andrew Huberman movement, right? This whole like let's get our bodies stressed, but then if you live at the sauna, you're gonna be very unhealthy. But if you go to the sauna every couple of days, then it's gonna be good. And I think this is what my orthopedist told me. He said like, if we inject you with cortisone or cortisol, whatever, a few times, it can help your body heal more quickly. But if we do it regularly, it will actually break down your tissue.
And that opens up another series of questions I had, more like really doubts I have, and I never found like a real answer to that. So supplements, right? So the problem with supplements, in a way, you don't want to abuse. And correct me. I mean, this is my take so far from what I read here and there. So you need to figure out what your body is not sufficiently producing to have a good baseline like health, because we're not made the same, and so some might have a deficiency somewhere, or they might struggle producing internally something, and that's where supplements come into play, and they really help. Or potentially even you can optimize your health with supplements, like improving the situation by like boosting a little bit, right? On the other end, if you take them for too long without breaks, or even if that's what I really don't have a good grasp on in terms of should you do it in cycles? Isn't it that when you stop, because there are like theories I read is like whenever you stop, you like basically expose your body at that point to like not being able to function without it, because it's like when you take sleeping medication. At some point you reach a level where you need more and then more and then more. It's never enough because your body adapts to like the fact that it receives it without having to produce it. So how do you like, is there a way to stimulate production of what you're missing with supplementation? Is basically like giving it to your body without stimulating anything, right? So it functions well, but then it depends on it.
Yeah.
So
So actually, there's a story out of my own life, which I'm, you never know if a perceived effect on your body is imagined or real, or like what it depends on, because nutrition is so complicated, and like your and behavioral things are super complicated anyway, because you're measuring your own perception of well-being, and you do a million things every day that could affect your well-being. However, so I was kind of like emotionally unwell like a year ago or something, so I started taking tryptophan in the evenings. And I'm a vegetarian that, with some exceptions, tries to be vegan and so on. And so one of my thoughts was like, well, maybe I'm actually low on tryptophan. And tryptophan is an amino acid, as we talked about before, that is also a serotonin precursor, or the serotonin precursor from diet, right? So like your body uses the tryptophan from the diet. So I think tryptophan is an essential amino acid. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. I think it's an essential amino acid. And essential meaning, in this case, it's something your body cannot make from other things.
Right.
And I think there's like I would say three big classes of essential nutrients, which are minerals, which you need from the diet because your body can't make minerals. There is, obviously the macronutrients, which you need to just like, for energy, which is proteins, carbohydrates, and fat. And then there's vitamins, which are molecules that your body can't make from other molecules. And then there's essential amino acids and essential fatty acids, right? I would say those are the three categories of essential nutrients.
Yeah.
Yeah. So things that your body can't make from other things. And technically, if you have a balanced diet, and we're technically all omnivores, so like I think like we evolved to kind of eat a little bit of everything and be all over the place, and that's how we gather our vitamins and minerals and so on. And then the problem is that we maybe get a very very not very varied diet these days, because there's people that live on, I don't know, McDonald's every day. I think that's not very good. And processed food is another thing, because like the more you process food, the more it can lose nutrients on the way. And I think so more like today's society is maybe not as optimized for the way our bodies evolved. That's my guess, at least. But also people died from malnutrition thousands of years ago, so who knows? Maybe we were malnourished the entire time. So I don't know. Other
Right.
species are way better at living off super simple diets, right? Like, so I think like most microorganisms can live off almost anything and produce their own vitamins and whatnot, right, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, our
Yeah.
diet is very
Yeah, we're I
complicated.
think
We
like
need a
we're like
lot of
one of the
different things.
most vulnerable to malnourishment, right, of all the species on this planet, I would guess.
Yeah.
Definitely mammals are. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know
I wouldn't know
about that for sure, but I mean, I believe it.
Yeah. So at least compared to microorganisms and so on. So anyway, the story about the tryptophan. I got sidetracked a little bit. So I took the tryptophan because I thought maybe I'm not getting enough, because tryptophan is like you get it from meat very often, and there is tryptophan in plants, but like probably less, and maybe it's not as digestible, which is another question. And I took it every day before going to bed, because you're supposed to take it before going to bed, because it can make you sleepy and so on. And then the other day I stopped taking it because I was taking another medication which affects hormonal pathways, I guess. And suddenly I started feeling like shit. And I don't know if it's what you said, that my body got so it got very it expected the tryptophan every day, and maybe somehow affected my my serotonin metabolic pathway somehow that
Yeah.
that it like dropped a lot. So I can imagine that. I don't know for sure that it's the case, because like it's also winter and there was other factors in my life, so I wouldn't know for sure. But that's the downside of supplements. Like you make yourself, even if it's just psychologically, you make yourself dependent on these supplements, which sucks, because like suddenly you might not get them, or like you're traveling and you don't have them or something, and then I don't like it, right? I don't like being dependent on these supplements. So I'm trying to down regulate a little bit my my addiction to my supplements. So that is something I'm starting with myself right
Mm.
now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, definitely what happened, right? I think it happens when you take creatine. So your
Yeah,
body makes creatine normally, but if you artificially supplement with large doses,
yeah,
I think this has been shown that your body stops really making a lot of it
yeah,
because it doesn't need to. I mean, there's a feed forward or feedback mechanism, right?
yeah,
For most things,
yeah,
and so there will be a window when if you stop taking creatine, that you would probably also feel like crap, and
yeah,
until your body started upregulating that. Same thing with people who really go into bodybuilding and take testosterone, right? There are
yeah,
feedback mechanisms there too. So their body stops making their own testosterone,
yeah.
and
So
and,
this
and
is,
so
I think,
there's
like this is one of those things, right? If you start taking exogenous testosterone, you have to take it forever, basically.
well, you don't have to take it forever, but you have to be able to know how to restart your own uh, hormone balance.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
this ends up basically you take the testosterone, you shut down your own production. If you stop taking it, then your body doesn't immediately start making it again
yeah,
for whatever reason, and it might never make it again unless
yeah,
you take other medication to trick your body into jump starting that program.
yeah, yeah.
But question, sorry guys, I have this like burst. So isn't there a way to potentially push your body to produce those substances that, I mean, of course it's a case by case, right? That is lacking and is not producing enough of, like the testosterone potentially you have certain practices, certain things you can do every day to potentially boost it,
Yeah,
right? Like is, so wouldn't, maybe that could be healthier actually to figure out. I don't know about, like for instance, one of the classic, I guess two classic supplements are vitamin D, and one could argue just go under the sun and your body will produce vitamin D, so you can avoid supplementation, not every day, because there
I
is.
do need to say though that a vitamin by definition, and I think vitamin D is actually maybe a misnomer, because vitamins by definition are things that you do need from the diet. Your body cannot
Mm,
produce them. Period. Vitamin D is a weird one because of the photosynthesis effect. I think, maybe Jason, you can correct me again. I think the body, with the help of sunlight, can produce it from cholesterol, right?
yeah, yeah.
So like it's, I don't know if it's actually essential in that sense, but all the other vitamins you have to get them from the diet. Like your body cannot produce vitamin C like ever. Only vitamin D, I think, can be produced by the
Well,
body.
I mean,
mm.
a lot of the B vitamins, right, aren't needed. Your body can make a lot of those.
What, your body can make B vitamins?
Some of them, yeah.
What? I thought the definition of a vitamin is that your body can't make them.
I mean, like you just said, it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, they were
Mm,
called vitamins maybe back 200 years ago,
okay.
and now we know that some of them the body can make.
Well, so the way I understand it is that, I mean, one example is the vitamin B12, right, which is often one that is deficient in vegans and vegetarians.
Yeah.
And actually, so the human body doesn't produce it, but the micro organisms in our gut can produce it. And that's actually why actually no animal can produce it, even like other animals don't produce it, but they actually get it from the bacteria in their gut. And that's why, for example, rabbits and similar animals eat their own poop, because it contains vitamin B12. So like the bacteria in the gut produces it, but it can't be absorbed anymore because it's too late in the gut, and then they poop out the whatever they ate, and then they re-eat it to get the vitamin B12. and humans don't do that, at least at least not many.
That's a good
For
advertising
eating your own
for
poop.
like, don't get your supplements, eat your. But I mean,
No,
yeah, I mean, it's
actually the funny thing is that if you were to eat your vegetables directly from a farm without washing them, you would get vitamin B12. But the problem is that
Mhm.
we buy them from the supermarket and they're super clean and there's no vitamin B12 because the soil contains vitamin B12.
Eat dirt.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Eat dirt, exactly. Eat yellow snow, or actually eat brown snow, I guess should be. So yeah, go ahead.
No, it's very interesting. So like that's vitamin D is an example, and then the other one is omega-3, right? Like, okay, fish oil. These things like omega-3. I don't know if you can produce it yourself. I don't think
No,
so,
you
right?
cannot. But I
So
also don't know. Is it essential? It probably is
so
essential, right?
so you can. It's just
Ah.
super not efficient.
Oh, but
You-
only from ALA, right? Like but you can't
yes.
make it. Okay, so you can make it from. So I think like when people talk about omega threes, they mean like DHA and EPA, right? Which are like
Yeah.
in the fish oil. And
Yeah.
the only omega threes that are in plants, I think, are ALA, which is an omega three that can be turned into these other ones from by your body,
Exactly.
but not very efficiently. But you still need some omega three in your diet. I think your body doesn't have any enzymes that can make any omega three, right?
Yeah.
From
Probably.
omega 6 or 9s.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm only familiar with that you can make the DHA in your body. It's just very not efficient, like you say.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's no other way. You have to supplement basically, either from nutrition or
However, I
directly.
don't know if you actually need them, right? Like you might suffer, but you might not die from not having them in your diet. I think. I don't know if that's potentially the difference.
But they promote the reason. I mean, what I again from lack of complete lack of knowledge, but what I understood is that you need a sort of balance between omega-3 and omega-6, right? It should be like 3 to 1,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
No, what
And
what
so
I'm saying is that is not. So there's things that are good for you, and there's things that are essential to you. Otherwise, you die. So you might not be at your healthiest without them in your diet, but you wouldn't die. That's the point I would say.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I totally agree. And I think this comes back to, do you survive long enough to procreate? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
You would. You could not eat a fish in your entire life. You would survive long enough to procreate, and that's all evolution cares about. Now, would you live to be 60 with full cognitive function and no cardiovascular disease? No.
Yeah, so it's also a question of quality of life, right? Because it's not all about dying. But I think other vitamins, like if you don't have vitamin C, you would like at all. I think you would die very quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you would develop.
Yeah,
So yeah, so the main point is probably, but because yeah, this goes back to the DNA related diet, right? Like the fact that if you can figure out this is the new what's it called, epigenetics, like the way, like if you can figure out what your like how you what's your DNA current structure, and how you, again, I'm probably using not the right terms, right? But the concept that I understood is you can actually uh, improve your current situation health wise, longevity wise, right? By figuring out how your DNA is and what's lacking, and then like adapting, optimizing your diet, and so your supplements based on that. Is that like is your lack of specific um, nutrients, let's say, or not really that, because it's not, most of the time it's not really about the fact that you don't eat the right diet, is that your body doesn't use what is it's provided with efficiently enough. Is that related to DNA, like to your DNA and how your body functions? Is that the problem?
I think
Or
that's a possibility, and that's a promise or a hope of better understanding these like flavors of these different proteins that are in your body. But I don't know if it's really been realized yet. Like if I get my genome sequenced, I don't know if I will be able to figure out like, oh, I need to take in more DHA, right? Or I need to eat more
Mm,
biotin because my body doesn't utilize it very well. I'm not sure. I think, but I think that's something that people are thinking of and working towards. And maybe some people are promising, but I don't know if the research is there yet.
I
Yeah,
see.
I mean, for a non-scientist, you ask good questions, Matteo.
Amazing questions. This is great.
Right, because I mean, I'm passionate about longevity, right? I'm trying to always find ways that are sustainable in the long term, right? Because otherwise, you end up um, overly optimizing, and then besides the immediate issues with taking care of all that, right, of the load of work that it becomes overly optimizing, the problem is that you probably create more issues than you solve, because then your body is like, what's with supplements or with specific daily rituals and practices, right? So I'm always trying to think like, uh, is there a way, and again, finding the information out there, right, is there a way to do this that's sustainable, and because we could argue the baseline behavior that we used to have before, like as humans, before industrialization, was way healthier, although the hygiene factors were a problem there, right? But at least we were living a healthier life because we were
That's
exposed
why
to
back in the day
natural stresses.
everyone lived to 200, right?
But there was a problem with
I mean,
medicine,
there's lots
lack
of
of
things. I
like
think malnourishment was very common.
malnourishment, yes.
But I mean, it's really hard to say, I think. But I think definitely like we don't necessarily live in the way that our bodies evolved to live. But I do think
Not
on
at
average
all.
we're
I mean,
much healthier. Also, I mean, yeah, it's a tough question. I don't know. Yeah.
no, but it is an interesting question. Like, is it because all that we just talked about, like these small exposure to stresses, right? Which is a trend right now. This concept of like, you should expose your body to like minor stresses every now and then to make sure that like it functions properly and responds properly, right? And it doesn't lose its power, let's say, in a rough way. And that's like, we're going way against that, like the everyday life, like if you think about like regulation of the temperature where you live, right? Like, we go for the standard, the flat, right? Like, temperature should always be the
Right.
same, right? Or lack of stresses in multiple ways. And so without the fact that some things actually cause psychological stress, but like lack of physical stresses, let's
Mhm.
say, right? We live our life in a way more and more where with technology, like we reduce the physical stress. Um, and so that is a problem. And before we didn't have it, like we were more active as a species, I think, right? And that's definitely, and one of the pillars is like physical activity, right? We all know that like fitness is one of the major contributor to longevity
Yeah,
in a
we
way.
don't run away from
uh,
lions enough.
right, we eat processed food, which as Tim, you said, like it's definitely like worse than eating the farm made salad as it is, right? But then hygiene is definitely improved, and medicine has improved tremendously, so those things definitely. But yeah, so it's interesting to understand how we can, I guess, on a daily basis. These are questions that I think me and Tim, at least, we talk about it a lot every week. I would say, like, how to improve without going crazy, but how to improve our lives for longevity and for
And well-being in
uh,
general, right? Also emotional
right,
and
right. But
psychological, because that's the other side, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
that's important too. I'm glad you came back to the small stressors, because when you brought it up before, I wanted to add that even in our simple model organisms. So in graduate school, I studied yeast. They're a single cell eukaryotic organism, and by eukaryotic, I just mean that they have their cell inside looks very similar to a human cell. It has all the same components, unlike a bacteria, for example. So I studied the simple eukaryotic cell, and I studied how the organelles are maintained throughout its life cycle. And something that people kept seeing is that damage accrued during its lifespan, and a very particular piece of this damage accrued, and it was called reactive oxygen species. And so everybody thought, okay, this accumulates during age, we have to get rid of it.
Just again,
completely.
clarify. I think, is that the same or not as free radicals?
Very similar. Yeah, it's they're two species that are they're very similar. So free radical is a sorry, reactive oxygen species is a type of free radical.
Okay. And basically, when people talk about taking antioxidants or things with antioxidant properties, is it's molecules that kind of like dampen these,
Exactly,
right?
because
Yeah.
the source of all these free radicals are almost always going to be oxygen related.
Yeah.
Um,
And just also clarification for maybe Matt and other people listening is that these radicals and the oxygen species, they damage DNA, right?
right, right. So the interesting thing about these free radical chemical species is that they will react with anything that they touch. So they molecularly change it, whether it's a protein, a lipid, or DNA. And if they molecularly start changing DNA, that leads to mutations and errors down the road. So everything makes sense. Okay, we have to completely get rid of these reactive oxygen species or free radicals. And so people did that, and genetically, and they did it with antioxidants. And the organisms, the simple model organisms, lived um, uh, not as long. They actually died earlier. And so
Wait,
then,
they eliminated the reactive oxygen species and they died earlier. Is that what you're saying?
yes, yes,
That's crazy. Okay.
yeah. And so people were again confused. I mean, humans are dumb. I mean, we're so dumb, right? You think scientists are supposed to be so smart, but like scientists are no different than anybody else. And so it's like we come up with these good hypotheses, and then they're all just always completely wrong. But then we keep moving forward and changing them, and so eventually they get more and more right. But basically, so they got rid of all these reactive oxygen species. The cells were sicker. They died earlier. They couldn't reproduce, and so you need a little bit of this stress. And what ended up being clarified through additional years of experimenting was that these reactive oxygen species, this damage that the cell was being exposed to, upregulated other pathways that help the cell survive. So I think that's really important to kind of note that even in this simple single cell model organism, it still needs to be stressed. And if you remove all of this stress, it's not good. It quits. It's not able to adapt. It doesn't upregulate these health promoting cellular pathways.
Yeah.
It's like it slows down, like it doesn't get engaged in anything, and so like it loses it abilities in a way, we could say. Like
Exactly.
What's also funny is that most living organisms depend on oxygen in some way, and oxygen is actually like one of the most like dangerous molecules because like
It's incredibly toxic.
it's so toxic. It reacts with everything. It destroys everything. And sometimes I imagine like on other planets where life evolved, independently of oxygen. Maybe maybe it's like a much more stable life over there. Who knows? Because like we,
a tangent on this about alien species, and it's connected to the idea of like, planet Earth, like there's oxygen everywhere. Nobody could live like from the outside. Someone could, an alien could think like, how could anybody, any form of life, like live there? There was actually I read an interesting thing unrelated, which was, maybe there are species out there, but they don't engage with us because we're blasting out. Like we're basically like saying we're here, like we're the only species that is actually broadcasting its existence, and they're all scared of us because of
Yeah.
that, because nobody logically would actually broadcast it, because everybody would be is afraid out there of like um, threats. And so we're the only like dumb species that is actually blasting out there, hey, we're here, to the entire universe. Anyway,
one of the
it's
solutions to
unrelated,
the
but
Fermi paradox, right? Actually, so unless you guys have another thing, I would. I mean, I don't know if you're interrupted one of your thoughts, but what I would love to do, if you both have a little bit more time, is to like each of us kind of like elaborate on their supplement and behavioral stack, I guess, on improving their well-being, because I think
I think it's a
yeah, I
great
think that
idea.
could be super interesting. Everyone says like what they all the stuff we take on a daily basis and kind of like what are the things that we do to improve our well-being and maybe longevity. Does that
Yeah.
sound fun?
Yeah. No.
Sounds good.
Can I start?
Yeah, let's go. For sure.
So, one thing that I want to say right before we start talking about supplements is that a really bad thing about supplements that we haven't talked about is their production, how
Oh
you get
yeah,
them.
there's no oversight. That's actually one of the reasons
Uh,
also. Yeah, it
so
sucks.
so so anytime you want to take a supplement, and I don't know the best way to do this,
Mm.
um, but you have to research it, and you have to be as sure as you can, that the supplement is what it is. One, and two, that there's not toxins in there, heavy metals. A lot. I mean, think about this stuff. A lot of this stuff that we get, we get from, well, from my perspective, overseas.
Yeah.
Um, and there aren't any regulations over there, or very few, and they don't really care how pure or how non-toxic these things are, as long as people are buying them.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and that's one of the reasons actually I want to wean myself off of some of these supplements, because like I was thinking that I tend to like just buy shit online on Amazon or whatever, but like it's not even Amazon producing them. It comes maybe from
So
some.
Amazon, I feel, has gotten really, really bad. It is the Wild West.
Yeah,
There's no Amazon oversight.
yeah, that's actually, and I'm actually thinking that I should start buying my supplements at the pharmacy, because I think there's a more oversight, at least in Europe, in pharmacies.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably. I've stopped buying any supplement on Amazon. I used to 10 years
yeah,
ago,
same.
but now I'm buying them all directly from the distributor. So, like, one of my favorite supplement producers is Bulk Supplements, and I've taken their products for, geez, more than 10 years now.
So what
Um,
makes you believe? What makes you trust them more than any other distributor?
yeah, so quote unquote third party testing.
Yeah,
There's companies called Labdoor. There's a bunch of other companies that uh, uh, say that they test these things, and they are what they are.
yeah.
There's this their supplements are made either in Mexico or in the United States,
Hmm.
and there's this practice called GMP, Good Manufacturing Practices.
Yeah, yeah.
So this isn't FDA approved, but it is the FDA coming through there, looking at the facility and saying, "Oh, everything's clean, everything's marked, and you're not. It doesn't look like it's run down. There's no rats running everywhere, and you know that. So it's not the FDA coming in and checking the actual product, but it's saying, like, oh, it's made in a facility that is up to our standards." Um, and then you have to trust that other companies are doing what they say they're doing and actually checking the product.
Who I think there's one of my favorite YouTubers. I don't know if it was Johnny Harris or Veritasium, did a video on the supplement industry recently. Did any of you watch it?
I haven't seen it.
It was fantastic. It was like, I mean, it was like
No.
very US centric, but it was like basically it's a wild west, and the supplement industry is like basically like the evil stepson of the pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah.
and like trying to take them our money, and like they don't care if we're better or worse after. And
Yeah.
because like like the supplement could make whatever you have worse, and you think you need more of it because you feel worse. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And like on aside from the toxins, like you don't know how much, even if the stuff is in there, whatever it is, like even if it's magnesium or something, you don't know if it's like 100 milligrams or 2000 milligrams, because like no one's testing.
I mean, yeah. So people try to do accuracy label tests. Third party people do, but you have to look for that, and it's not on every supplement. So Bulk Supplements is big. It's a big company. It's been around for a long time, and from what I've seen, their accuracy, their label accuracy scores on it's almost right on the nuts. It's
Yeah,
not over. It's not under.
that's good.
And then they've never been found to have any sort of production problems, no toxins, no metals, things like that.
Yeah. So the
I'll
I
definitely
just
check
I
it
just
out.
looked it up on YouTube. I think it's this one. Your supplements are a lie. It's like from a month ago by
Mm,
Johnny Harris. I think that was the one. It's very
Okay.
US centric, so it's definitely like different in the European Union. I think there's probably a bit more oversight here, but I wouldn't guarantee it.
I know another company that's like gone under like a lot of scrutiny and certifications, etc. It's a Belgian company. It's called Metagenics. And I mean, I think I came across because a doctor prescribed to one of my family members, and then I checked out, and they make a lot of supplements. So I'll send you the link.
Yeah, please do.
It's
Because like I actually have a bunch of shit from Amazon, and I'm just recently.
it's not cheap. The only thing is that it's
Yeah.
not cheap,
Yeah.
but they have. I think they're very well regulated, and the European they produce them in Austin in Belgium. So like,
Yeah, I think
there's a little bit
usually
more.
good when the companies produce in the EU or in the US versus I mean, without being racist or anything, but like, yeah, I think some countries have just like less strict regulations than the
They
USA.
they absolutely have less strict
Yeah,
regulations, right?
yeah,
I mean, there are almost zero regulations in China. I
yeah.
don't feel
No, that's true.
I don't think that's
And if they do regulate, they probably regulate to protect their own people, not us. Right?
dude. They don't even do that, right?
Yeah, they probably don't do that. Yeah.
I mean, just like even without any evidence, look at how the factories and things are run in China, and look how the people are treated. If they don't care about their own people that much, do you think they actually care about the products that they're shipping around the world?
Probably not, but let's not get political. But they probably don't. Yeah.
I
So,
mean,
I mean, I agree. I mean, I agree. Like, I think in particular with ingestibles, like I'd happily buy a lamp from China because it's not going to kill me. Probably. I mean,
you
it's.
don't know. You don't know.
Yeah,
I
you don't
don't know.
know.
It's true. I don't know.
Did you read about Shane, the clothing manufacturer from China that has toxic
No,
clothes?
no.
Like it's actually almost going for an IPO if they didn't already, and they are basically producing clothes that are like highly
That's crazy.
toxic, and people buy them in like $2,
Yeah.
and then
I mean,
like
it is a problem, and I think like this is getting a little bit too far away from subject. But I think like there are many problems where like us getting less and us being less and less in touch with our natural way of doing things makes things worse, right? And there's so many examples of this, and I think we would all agree that getting your nutrients from actual food is best, right? I think
Yeah,
almost no one would disagree with that. um, but supplements, I think like supplements are super important for people with certain diseases, right? I think that's number one. For people with whatever reason have a particular diet and are missing some nutrients that are important. And I think and then there's some supplements that I think like are almost universally agreed to be like at least a decent idea, because the Western diet at least is not good at providing some of these. Maybe we can talk about these. But also, again, I think none of us is a medical doctor or a nutritionist, and all of this is our own opinion in a way. So just
oh yeah,
just as a
yeah,
right,
disclaimer, right? So,
right.
yeah, for
um,
sure.
Jason, you want to go?
Yeah. Well, okay. So sorry. One last thing before I give you
Let's do it.
the
No, for sure.
what I'm taking. I think it is really important to limit toxin dose, right? And so we talked about heavy metal ingestion, things like that.
Hmm.
One of the things is, for a while in the United States, for a whole generation, right, we had leaded gasoline.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean,
For
not
and
only in the U.S., it was everywhere.
it was
There was
everywhere, right?
there was
That
actually
le-
okay. This is one of the most. Sorry to interrupt again, but this was one of the most fantastic Veritasium videos of all time,
Dude,
where we
this
talked
is
about that.
so fascinating, isn't this?
It
And
was so
so
fascinating.
for generations, right? They grew up with a heavy lead exposure
Yeah.
because adding lead to gasoline was it was like people loved it. They're like, oh, my car runs so much better. Like I get so much
Yeah.
more life out of my car.
Yeah.
And so like for generations, right? Like a one full or two generations, there's like a huge IQ drop. And those people are like running the world right now,
Yeah.
And so
let's not call any names.
so I think before you get into supplements or any of this stuff, spend your
Mm.
money and risk taking potential whatever supplements, you have to limit your pollution and toxin exposure. You have to try to eat as well as you can, and that's limiting artificial fats, artificial preservatives, things like that. And then you have to exercise as hard as you naturally can.
Yeah.
And then only then after you do that and optimize your sleep 8 hours, right? So
Yeah.
sleep,
Yeah.
food, exercise, limit toxins wherever that may be from. then start thinking about, okay, how do I further optimize this with supplements?
Yeah, 100%. It's a little bit like very, very
Makes
slightly,
sense.
but a little bit like before you think about investing your money, try to get rid of your debt, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So yes, supplements aren't going to cover up any deficit in those previous areas, basically.
for sure.
Um, with that being said, uh, two supplements that I've always taken, or that I started out taking, are fish oil, and I've switched brands a number of times. Right now, I have this brand. It's a Carlson's Norwegian something brand, and I take it because, or I order it and take it because it has a really high dose of DHA, and DHA seems to be much more important than EPA.
One of them is converted into the other one, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Then I don't know.
Um,
I thought that was the case, but maybe not.
but DHA seems to be the more important one for benefits to your health and longevity,
Yeah.
and the one that your body can't make or makes less of naturally, even though it makes both less. And then creatine I've taken. However, I've stopped taking creatine recently.
I did too, actually. I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, I stopped taking it.
Okay, yeah. So, I'd always taken creatine. I took it for about 7 or 8 years, and then I stopped taking it, and I didn't really notice a huge difference.
What
So
about do you measure your body fat percentage, or like do you measure your muscle mass?
I don't actually, dude. So I just bought a scale that purports to do this for me. So I'm kind of excited to try it out.
So I mean, you know, it's not accurate. I have one too, but I think it is at least relatively accurate, meaning like you can track your own changes. However,
Right.
of course, it depends so much on what you have
I
in
have
your
it too.
belly at the moment, how much you drank, your hydration level, and so
So
on.
is the scale that you have, is it just a foot scale, or is it
Yeah,
like
it's just
a
foot, just foot.
so I bought a foot and handle
Okay,
scale,
that's probably better.
which
Yeah,
they say
Uh,
is more accurate, and it makes sense because
probably.
I was in doubt if getting that one or the one that I got, but then
I mean, none
maybe I
of them
should
is
have done.
super accurate, right? None of them is like extremely accurate. It'll
It
tell
gives you
you
a trend.
trends. Yeah.
Yeah. At least exactly that. What I see every day is like I see the trend. I'm like, my fat percentage is increasing or decreasing,
yeah.
and also it gives you the another measure that it's interesting is the pulse wave velocity.
Yes. Do you have Withings?
Very interesting.
I have
Yes, I do
Withings, but
have
it
that.
doesn't
Yeah.
measure that. I have Withings also.
So I just ordered the most expensive Withings scale.
Mine was a gift, but yeah. So and
Yeah. So then it gives you that. That's pretty interesting, and then
what is
it
that
gives
supposed
you
to tell you?
basically it's like basically how young is your circulatory
Okay.
system, like based on that, like the faster the higher, the lower the velocity, it's like a number. So I think the lower the velocity, pulse wave velocity, the younger your circulatory
Yeah,
system
so I
is.
think it measures some sort of a resistance factor of your cardiovascular system. And so the
Mm.
more hardened your arteries are, the more collagenated they are, the more resistance they have. I think. I'm not sure. This could be
How would
totally
it
wrong.
Yeah.
differentiate that from just the regular impedance that it says?
Tissue.
Because like it
So
goes
I'm not
everywhere,
sure.
right? Yeah.
I think it has to do. I'm not sure. It has to do something with the heart rate, and
Oh,
I don't
that
know.
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I
But
can see
it is pretty, and also they give you another one. It's a bit addictive because you check every day. You'll see
that. Yeah, I
another
have the
one
Oura,
is
so
I'm so
I know
excited. I'm
all
so
about
excited.
that.
the nerve health. That's what they call it. So they measure. It's a measure from 0 to 100 of how healthy is your nervous system. I think the way they do is pretty fascinating. Like since I mean mine is just 2 feet on the scale, right? But they just send you like electro something stimuli to your feet, very light, so you don't even notice it. And this way, they basically check your nerve health on your feet, and they infer it on the rest of the
Yeah,
body,
which is
basically.
weird is that being kind of like involved in data science and so on is that I think it's very hard because like all these measurements they do with electric pulses through your feet.
Mm.
I don't know how they would tell apart like your circulatory system from your nerves or your body fat and your tissues because it's just electrical impulses going through your body. So it seems like a hard problem to solve this. And
It is, but you'd be like there's an app now that I'm testing for that actually started for HRV measurement. So you have like your wearable, like the stripe, and then what this app has is like you take a picture of you, and it infers the actual body composition
oh,
from the
that's cool.
picture.
Whoa.
Wait,
I think it's just
can you
pictures.
wait?
Yeah.
What is the app?
So it's from the
Can I use it without the device or not?
yes, this one, yes. So the company is Elite HRV is the one that that started, and then they made an app which is called.
I want to try that.
And you and
let
so
me-
you're sure it's not just an app that some dude made to get naked pictures of men and women?
No, I mean you're never sure, right?
The company holding is ratemybody.com.
That's hilarious.
Let's see. I'll tell you because I think it's this company's been around for a while for the HRV, and then they recently.
But is it a different app from the regular Elite HRV? Okay.
Yeah, it is a different. Let me find.
That is cool, actually. That is cool. Maybe if you combine, because like if you combine different things, like including your scale, impedance measurements, and the picture, and you trained an algorithm on that, like I think it would be able to tell it pretty well.
Spren is called SPREN.
Downloading that right now.
And I mean, I compare it to writings.
SPREAN?
No, SPREN.
Oh, I don't find that.
Basically, I compared it, and I think the scale is much better. I mean, a bit better.
I mean,
of course,
but like you don't know because you don't know the truth, right? You don't have a truth value to compare to.
No, but I mean, it was giving me borderline. Like, okay, you know how, like, in terms of body mass composition, right? Like, it was giving me a too high a percentage of fat.
Well, what did it say?
It was like almost 17%.
And you think you have less than 17? Because I definitely have more than 17.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the scale gives me 13 to 14 consistently every day, depending on like how much I eat.
I mean, that's super skinny because like, I mean, I have my scale tells me 20, but I have to tell you, like, my mom has another Withings, just a different model. It tells me 25. So this tells you how dependent on the algorithm of the scale it is. And I think it even depends like on the fact that how the humidity in your room is, like how thick the calluses on your feet are, like if you just showered and like all this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But then if you keep like using it, but another thing is that one thing I was reading is that I mean the body fat percentage is not necessarily what you see, because it could be that you have like fat between organs that's like way less visible, visceral fat, which is probably worse in a way, right?
That's what they say.
So that's
wait, but do you have a six-pack?
Yeah, I mean, not fully,
like
but like I probably have a 4-pack, not a 6-pack.
Okay.
Let's
but like I think that sounds like 15%, right? 15 is usually when you start seeing it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't really have a lot of fat. Like my problem is actually that one, so I don't have enough fat. So I think it looks accurate. And so the app was telling me you are borderline getting too much fat compared to your body composition, which could make sense anyway, right? But I've found it to be a little bit too much on the.
I mean, to really know, you have to do like a DEXA scan or something, right? That's probably the most accurate.
Yeah.
So I did look on Reddit, and a couple people were or said that they compared it. They did the Withings, and then they had a DEXA that same day, and they were off by maybe 3 or 4%. Either way,
like in either direction.
Yeah, I think I came across 4 reports, and they were up and down.
Okay. By
3 or 4%. So
I mean, I think it depends so much on the body type, because like I think where people store fat can be so random based on gender, but also based on the fact that you work out and and you're just your frame, right?
Yeah.
But another question that came to me, like looking, Whiting's also gives you like other metrics, like the resting metabolic rate, which by the way, this brand also gives you. But what I didn't understand, what for me was a bit counterintuitive, like if you have a higher metabolic rate, you're supposed to be have a younger. It's like you're supposed to be younger in biological age.
Yeah.
Which makes it so you need more power to function, basically, right? Because if you have a higher metabolic rate, it means that you're like resting metabolic rate. It means you basically consume energy without doing anything, right? While resting.
If it's the resting
So it mean,
metabolic rate, yeah.
yeah. But to me, that seemed counterintuitive. Like if you need more energy when you're like younger compared to like
I mean, it's not
when
like
you're older.
it depends on what they mean by resting. I think just young people are more jittery than old people, and they just like move more constantly. And I think I don't. It depends what they mean by resting. Like, or what is it? Baseline metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate?
Resting,
Okay,
resting.
so I don't know. It depends on that definition. I think just like kids are like super fidgety, right? Much more than old people. So this is probably what it is. They just run everywhere, and and like just like they can't sit still for a long time. They're just like, right. That's what I would guess.
But that it wouldn't be resting anymore.
Yeah,
right?
that depends on the question. I don't know if they truly mean resting or just like average baseline, whatever. I don't know.
But yeah, still good. I mean, we could compare in the future if you if you have also the same scale.
Yeah. I'm like
So-
actually getting it today. Like it's supposed to be dropped off like in the next couple hours.
Have you ever done a DEXA scan, or have you ever gotten?
I have not. No.
Okay. What's the closest thing you've done? Like, what did you ever get your fat? Did you do caliper?
Like in high school, I think a gym teacher pinched my fat.
Are you sure? Are you sure he was measuring your body?
He said it was good, so I don't know.
And then he created an app to have random people send him naked pictures. Yeah.
He was like, "Here's my number."
Okay, so where were we? I think we started with the supplements. Oh yeah, you stopped taking creatine, and that's what we just started. Yeah, I stopped taking it also because like I wanted to, because like it's supposed to inflate your muscle mass, right, on the scale, just because like your muscles soak full of water if you take creatine. And I did notice it. Like when I started taking creatine, I think my muscle mass increased by like a couple pounds over a few weeks, more quickly than usual. So I'd expect to see a drop in muscle mass when you stop taking creatine, based on just the water retention effect.
Yeah, and I mean creatine's one of the only supplements that is shown again and again to benefit on muscle strength and muscle output, strength output, and neurological function. So on
why did you stop taking
memory tests? I stopped taking it because this is just conjecture. I think it was adding to my blood pressure issue. So as I'm aging, I'm getting slightly higher blood pressure. Like I've always had high blood pressure.
Yeah.
I've always been, I don't know if you guys know anything about blood pressure, but the limits now are like, they want you to be under 120 over 80. They used to be, back 20, 30 years ago, they said 140 over 80 or 140 over 90 was good and fine, but they keep lowering it. And that's because these long-term studies keep coming out. And if they stratify people's health, mortality, and even cognitive function as they age, the lower the blood pressure you have, the better. And you see benefits to lowering your blood pressure down to about 115. So 115 over 70 or so and below even is where they really want you to be. And I've always
What is your blood pressure?
I've always had about 130, 135 over 80 or
even 75. As a kid.
Yeah, well, I didn't measure it as a kid, but as a high school student, you go in for the physical, and they've always said, "Well, your blood pressure is a little high," and I've always chalked it up to maybe white coat syndrome, or I drink coffee in the morning constantly. But now the last couple of times, actually a year and a half, I started going to the doctor, and it was 145, and one time it was 160 over 80, and so I'm really paying attention to that now. I'm actually on blood pressure medication.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think about changing your diet?
No. So, well, yes, but it's, okay. We should have a whole podcast about this, because in the last year and a half, I have just consumed myself with heart, cardiovasculature, blood pressure research. And I have a lot of opinions on it. But basically, it seems like I probably became sodium sensitive. And so I need to drastically limit my sodium intake.
How does that happen? Like, can you say it in 1 or 2 sentences? Because I'm super salt addicted.
Yeah. So I think I think sodium might be directly nephrotoxic, like kidney toxic, and so just the constant creating or just the constant like flow of sodium and the flux of sodium in the kidneys, and the kidneys having to work to balance that out from a high
Mm.
sodium diet contributes to their dysfunction. And over decades, they lose function, and that kind of feeds forward the issue.
Yeah. Is it the capillaries bursting or something, or is it something
Could
else?
be. So I don't know for sure. I actually kind of want to go in and get a like a CT of my kidneys to see if there's
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
atherosclerotic lesions or something like that. But it
Well,
could be
the
that.
CT is a lot of radiation, huh?
So it's a little radiation.
Another podcast.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've had a cardiac CT too, because I'm interested in where I'm at. I'm almost 40 now, and I
Yeah.
want to get some baseline measurements for some of these values.
Yeah.
So I do look at it, and they've gotten very good in the last 10 years, 5 years at lowering the radiation dose. Because you're right, a CT scan is an X-ray, but it's a lot of X-rays
Yeah,
constantly.
it's like thousands of X-rays in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they've lowered it. So for the cardiac CT, for example, it's tough to do a cardiac CT because your heart's moving constantly, and they
Yeah. Yeah.
need it still. And so they used to just hit it with a CT scanner constantly and snap images constantly, and then just take the ones that were all aligned. Now they hook you up to a pulse monitor, all this stuff, and they can sync the machine with your pulse rate. And
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
the dose is actually very, very low.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's very cool. I for me the sodium thing is interesting because I had low blood pressure most of my adolescence, and now it's kind of like normal. But I eat so much salt. Like you can ask anyone in my social circle. Like I salt everything. I put salt on the most salty thing just because
yeah.
I need more salt. And now my blood pressure is kind of normal. I'd say, like quote unquote, like it's 120/80. But it used to be super low all the time. So I probably like salted my way up to normal blood pressure because I was super low. But
You're
maybe
so
that was
lucky.
stupid. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm lucky, but I'm also probably stupid for like not like wanting. But I was wondering if I was always having salt cravings because I had such low blood pressure because um, I constantly crave salt. It's crazy.
Oh, I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. But also, I mean,
There's
sugar
a
is
lot
another
of
one, right? Sugar is also like probably like nephrotoxic a little bit because of it does raise blood pressure in the same way, right?
Dude,
but
sugar's probably toxic to everything.
Yeah, but you also need it, right?
yeah.
So
But Timmy, you like there's an easy way to get rid of salt. Stop using it, and you'll get used to not eating without. Like
maybe yeah, but
I
like
never put
so for
salt,
example,
and
sorry, I'm interrupting just because
no
like
worries.
Jason and I had this talk, like we talked about this like I don't know a month or so ago. This is what led to this conversation actually, and we talked about potassium, and that's I actually wanted to ask Jason about his mineral supplementation also because like I used to do a lot of just magnesium, and then I felt like maybe I needed potassium because I go to the gym a lot, and I had all kinds of issues, and I thought maybe I'm missing potassium because like I eat a lot of sodium and I go to the gym a lot, so I sweat a lot and I dance a lot, so I sweat all day long, and I don't eat like too many bananas or like I don't know things containing potassium. And then I got the salt that Jason said. So Jason told me to get a salt that is for people with blood pressure issues. That is like a mix of sodium and potassium, and it tastes much more salty than regular salt, and it has a mix of sodium and potassium.
So instead of table salt, sodium chloride, it's potassium chloride.
Exactly, but the one I bought is actually a mix of the two. It's
Oh, it's a
like
mix. Oh, okay, cool.
yeah, because like also like potassium is actually dangerous, right? Like you can overdose very quickly on
It
potassium.
can be. It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you eat a spoon of salt, like regular table salt, like you'll probably vomit, but like you wouldn't die. But I think like if you eat like a tablespoon of potassium chloride, you might die. I don't know for sure. Like I'm just saying stuff without knowing. But
No, the risk profile is much higher. Yeah.
yeah, the risk profile is higher. Anyway, so it's a mix of potassium chloride and sodium chloride, and I started using it in all my food. But then I got super dizzy all the time suddenly, and I don't know if it's because of that. Like that's what I said before. Like there's so many things happening in life that could make you dizzy, right? But I had a few days like around Christmas, and I was okay, to be fair, I had the flu right before. It might be that, but like I got super dizzy and like it was crazy, and I stopped taking it, and now I feel better. But it could be coincidence. So I still have it, but I stopped taking it.
Were you checking your blood pressure?
No, I actually just bought the machine, so probably I should start measuring my baseline and then taking it again. That makes.
Yeah.
I just bought the machine. I didn't have a machine before, so
yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, there are a lot of so I don't know if we want to talk about these things in separate podcasts. We'll be happy
Well,
I
to.
feel like this could go on for 10 hours.
Yeah.
On the,
And actually, guys,
on the cardiovascular, like the sorry.
Oh, sorry, no, and actually, I gotta call it quits here pretty soon. I got the family, and I got stuff to do still.
Of course. No, I mean we can definitely bring it to another episode. I'll leave it to with a couple of like open questions. One is systolic diastolic pressure, like blood pressure, like that's something I never understood because there's a lot on like the range. But what if you're low on the diastolic and quite high on the systolic? Is that good or bad? That's an open
I can
question.
talk about that forever because that's exactly what I have.
Okay. Yeah, that's an
we'll
and then the other thing to talk about similar is I read a lot about this concept of the 4 dimension of water and how like proper hydration now, like they talk about this gel water and the fact that if the water in your body is harder, it actually improves your cardiovascular. Like there's a lot of concepts around that is very fascinating that I don't know. I mean, at least from my end, I rarely read about. So I think we could do a podcast about cardiovascular. That would be very fun. And yeah, and then maybe we can continue on the supplements later.
Yeah.
And the next time.
So maybe let's wrap it up. But I wanted to ask Jason just before he leaves, like your top 3 pieces of advice for staying healthy and living longer.
Oh man, I mean, honestly,
or make it top 5, whatever you want. Top whatever number.
But this is we could go on forever.
Okay, just give us the teaser then.
So keep moving. Keep moving. Have a purpose, a social purpose, and don't overeat. That's like literally it. So have you guys heard of these blue zones? Right?
We talk about it all the time.
Yeah. So the thing that keeps coming up, right? It's they eat the stuff that they grow in their gardens, and they eat like fruits, vegetables, some meat, some very low meat, right? They have social purpose, and they're very active.
Yeah, that's actually we had an episode actually just a couple of weeks ago. It's not published yet, but an episode on happiness also, and I think that this correlation of mortality and happiness is very strong, or anti-correlation. And one of the big ones in all the studies out there is social connections and relationships, and the health of your social connections is so crucial to your health.
Yeah,
it's really incredible. Yeah.
So, how many like really old people, like your grandparents, have you guys been around towards the end of their life?
Not too many, because like they would, if they were still alive, they would all be over 110 now.
Okay, yeah. So I've had a few. I've had when I was younger in high school, my grandma was in her mid 80s when she passed, and I have aunts and uncles who are pretty old. They're in their mid 80s right now, and the thing that you keep hearing them say is, I'm tired, and I'm kind of bored, and I just don't feel like all the people that they grew up with have passed on. And they're kind of ready. They don't see any purpose in it. So I've extended family who they don't want to go to the doctor to get checkups. They don't want to get their dialysis because they just don't see a point in it.
Yeah.
Which connects to how harder it gets. The more you age, the harder it gets to create new connections, because one could argue there's a lot of people in the world still, right? But it's harder to like form new relationships. That's another thing. Yeah.